Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Taylor Ann, and I am here with Mr. Mitch Holthus. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Taylor, it's great to be with you. I think a lot of the organization, past president, actually, at one time. Yeah, it's great to be with you today, and especially to see what Dave and the staff has done with the organization as we push forward.
Awesome. Well, you just won your first Missouri Sportscaster of the Year award, but it is your 9th overall award. All 8 others are from Kansas, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, there's the Missouri River divides Kansas City. People go, is that in Missouri or Kansas? The answer is both. And the Chiefs Kingdom is vast, and it's growing by the day because it's had a big international impact with Patrick Mahomes as quarterback. We're seeing a lot of interaction from the international level. The Asian countries, Western Europe, South America have become Chiefs fans. So our scope is, I don't know if I'll be, the Honduras Sportscaster of the Year, but maybe at some point. But it's an honor to be listed in both states. Dave's got the stats, but there haven't been that many that have been Sportscaster, Sports Writer of the Year in 2 states. So it's something there's several, but not a lot, but it's something that I have a great deal of pride in.
That's awesome. Well, you have quite the resume. You work for the Chiefs Radio Network. You're a play-by-play announcer for the Kansas City Chiefs, a college basketball announcer for ESPN, and hosts for Chief Insider, Chiefs Live, and a few more as we were discussing prior to the recording. But you have a long list of accomplishments, so we're just going to jump right into some questions. But the first thing I want to ask you, and you've gone into a little bit, but how does it feel to be nominated by your peers once again for this award?
It's a feeling that's hard to describe because you want to do a good job, but you also want to represent the profession. Mm-hmm. And the people that vote on these awards are from all the entire spectrum of now sports journalism, whether that's from the digital side, social side, the traditional media, but not just electronic traditional media. It's, sports writers as well. So, and especially in Missouri, because it takes into account the communities like Springfield, which is a great sports town in Missouri, the southeastern part of Missouri, which isn't necessarily a hotspot of the Chiefs Kingdom, and St. Louis now, which is kind of a territory that's being fought for in the NFL, but a lot of Chiefs fans there, but still to have especially the St. Louis journalists recognize me, and I say it humbly, but it's an honor that's hard to describe. I was frankly surprised when I was told that I received the Missouri Award. I grew up in Kansas. I'm a K-State alum. I did Kansas State University's play-by-play and a lot of marketing for 13 seasons. But to have the state of Missouri recognize me is something that I take great pride and I'm humbled by.
That's awesome. Well, I am sure you are very deserving of that award, but can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the sports broadcasting field to begin with?
It's interesting. I'm at my roots today. My father's had some health issues, so I'm in the house that I grew up in, and that's kind of where it started. I grew up in a small town in Smith Center, Kansas. It's famous for 3 things. The song "Home on the Range" was written here, just about 4 or 5 miles from this house. It's property and a cabin that's still there that we preserve. That's another part of my tasks. Also, it's famous for great high school football. There's a New York Times bestseller written about Smith Center football called Our Boys. Joe Drape, New York Times writer, embedded in the small town for a year and wrote a terrific book. And they had the nation's longest winning streak at one time at 79 games. So I grew up in a culture of sports, love sports. It's also famous because it's near the center of the 48 states. It's in this county, about 16 miles from where I'm at right now. But I set that up because it was a love for sports growing up on a farm with an imagination. But I started to volunteer at a nearby radio station. I started to do some play-by-play on my own. One thing that was very helpful, Taylor, is I went to a small school, about 60 in my graduating class. Wow. But I told you, very active in athletics as a school. And there's great tradition in the school. So I was able to play football, basketball, baseball, track, golf. I was good in none of that. But it gave me a great perspective of understanding competition. I was the try hard guy, and I had my moments. I wasn't a complete goof, but uh, it was very, very influential in me in having this passion to be involved in sports at another level. I was also involved in debate and forensics. I was a speaker and debater. So I thought, well, how do I put sports and speech and debate together? And while I became involved in sports broadcasting, even in high school, where I had a guy named Tad Feltz, who was a longtime sportscaster in this area, that took me under his wing. And then I did my undergraduate work at Kansas State, and also had work in business administration there, had 2 degrees, but also continued to work on campus like you have at High Point, or some others have, most have on their campuses, and then started at the entry level of broadcasting in a small Kansas market where I was doing everything from selling advertising to covering 35 high schools to covering a junior college, and doing the play-by-play of all of that, selling and marketing all of that. And it was just building brick by brick by brick. And then had an opportunity, became the voice of the K-State Wildcats, and that led to me being the voice of the Chiefs in the mid-90s.
That's awesome. That's such a unique story. What would be your favorite part of your position as a sports broadcaster?
The relationships. And I know people have said that a lot, but to have real meaningful discussions with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, who are all not only just players and coaches that I cover, but there have been strong relationships there. And it's those guys will go down as some of the best to ever play in the National Football League. I mean, Coach Reid is going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Travis Kelce is going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And after the first 46 games of his career, no quarterback in the history of the NFL has performed the marks and the records that Patrick Mahomes has had. But to have relationships with them is a super highlight to me. The other is a relationship with the fandom. Now, Taylor will tell you, creativity is a big part of this business, as we know. And it's not just necessarily being creative from a digital standpoint, where we can create an app, which is pretty cool, but it's also being creative in how we present the message. And so I humbly say this, but I came up with the moniker Chiefs Kingdom. That was mine. I needed something to define, and I'd seen it, but I wanted to give it something of a that people could understand. And it's from rural, it's from urban, it's many states. I told you it's international, and so it's been. So I came up with that term, but that was a part of being creative.
That's awesome that you created the Chiefs Kingdom. That's so cool that you did that. But I was wondering, you've attended a lot of our NSMA Awards Weekend. I was wondering if you had a favorite memory from attending them.
Yeah, and honestly, I'll start with the fact that the organization was so beneficial for me that I felt compelled that I needed to do my part. And so when I was able to go on the board and then eventually be president, and honestly, I was president during a time where it was a challenge because we were dealing with the Hall of Fame, and still that was in Salisbury, and it was just some time that I needed to give to my profession and to the organization. And so that's something that I have great pride in as well. But every weekend that we were there, my wife Tammy and I were there for an award ceremony, was meaningful in its own individual way. In the fact that we made new friends. I had a chance to see colleagues from around the country. I had a chance to see, we not only exchange ideas, there were times that we could do it in a relaxed setting. And more often than not, Taylor, we're not in a relaxed setting. Mm-hmm. Our time is not our own. That's something I try to tell people who want to enter the profession. Your time is not your own. And you have to give up holidays. You give up, every weekend, basically. And you're always on a deadline. There's always it's next game, next show to do. That weekend was a time where everybody could decompress and just talk like we're talking right here. And then the those discussions, and some of those both professionally and personally, have been some of the most meaningful that I've had in my life, and they are fond memories. So the organization has great value at a lot of ways, but also an accountability, I think, and I think this is especially true now. There's an accountability that we need as journalists to do our work thoroughly and to do it correctly and to do it accurately, because we live in a realm now where, especially in the digital world, where we want to be first with the story, and more often than not, it's inaccurate and it can become damaging. And so the accountability that this organization provides, even if it's in just casual conversation, can be impactful from a standpoint of accountability.
What a wonderful pitch for the organization. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But circling back a little bit to your career experience, do you have a favorite story from your time in your position?
You know, it's just a whirlwind. I'm over 40 years now in the profession. And of course, to win the Super Bowl, I get emotional every time I talk about it. Mm-hmm. And to have be done in such a way where the team that for 22 years, my first 22 years of the voice of the Chiefs, we didn't win a playoff game.
Wow.
And we had moments, we had great regular season moments, but we had these colossal collapses in the playoffs. And for Andy Reid to come and transform the organization is the first highlight. Two, to win that first playoff game in my 22nd season, we were able to beat Houston in a wild card game, 30-0. And it was an incredible moment. And thinking some would just blow it off now as it's just a wild card first round win. But it was a bigger deal than that to me, because I knew what it took to get through those 22 years of survival, basically. And then to be able to go to 3 straight AFC championship games and to win an AFC championship at Arrowhead Stadium in 2019, that was prior to the Super Bowl. To go to Super Bowl 54, we had to win that game. And why was that big? Because, and I said this on the air, and people still quote it, but the stadium that Lamar Hunt, the team that Lamar Hunt founded, has just won Lamar Hunt's trophy in the stadium that was Lamar Hunt's dream. The AFC champion wins the Lamar Hunt trophy. He's the founder of our franchise. For years and years and years, his wife, still living, Norma Hunt, had to present that award to the Patriots, the Steelers, the Broncos, and never to the Chiefs. They brought that podium out, the confetti was falling, and Norma Hunt was able, along with Clark Hunt, our chairman and CEO, to hold the Lamar Hunt trophy. It's an unforgettable moment. Mm-hmm. And that just set us up for Super Bowl 54. And when you do play-by-play, and especially in a big event like that, it could be a Final Four, it could be a conference championship game, but this was Super Bowl 54. And I remember thinking, as much as doing that game for the moment, it was more about posterity, because those moments are played over and over and over again. And the calls that have become most famous from that game were Damian Williams had a 38-yard run to seal the victory. Mm-hmm. And I said, Damian Williams has just run to immortality and will be remembered forever in the hearts of the Chiefs kingdom. Then an interception by Kendall Fuller sealed the game. Kansas City, you've got a champion at the end, because it was such a long, hard climb. And I was thinking of 25 to 26 years of Chiefs players that I knew, some that were greatest in the Will Shields is going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame and won 2 playoff games in his career. Derek Johnson won 1 playoff game. And I wanted all those guys to feel that Super Bowl championship. And I said, the Chiefs kingdom has firmly planted its flag on top of football's highest summit. And I wanted that moment to be everybody's moment. All those former players, all those fans from rural areas, urban areas, every card-carrying, red-blooded member of the Chiefs kingdom to feel that moment, to plant that flag. That's what I wanted them to feel. And I also felt it. But those are memories that I'll have in my heart and soul as long as the Lord gives me days on this life.
That's such a special story. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
With all of your positions and accomplishments, you're obviously juggling hosting a lot of shows at once. I was wondering if it was easy to juggle those, or was there a learning curve? How do you do all of that, basically?
It's a terrific question, Taylor. And honestly, everyone is its individual case. There are times I'm the interviewer and the host. There's times I'm interviewed. There's times I have to write. There's times I have to produce. There's times I have to create. But what I try to do is try to train my mind to treat every one of those in a singular fashion and try to understand an encompassing thought. If I'm sitting down with Andy Reid, I get the chance to talk to him a lot. It is easy for me to take those conversations for granted. The realm changes. We're in a losing streak. We're in a winning streak. He's going through a tough time in his family life right now. I have to understand and have empathy and understanding for him as a person and as a coach. So every time I interview him, it has to be with that in mind. What is the environment that I'm in at the time with that person? If I'm being interviewed, it's the same thing. It's easy for us in this profession to be caught in kind of a cookie cutter, hey, we're just writing code and going down a flow chart. And honestly, we're engineering every time we do a program, and in all the different realms, it's something that has to be thought of almost like an absolute value in mathematics. You put brackets around it, it's right in front of you, but it's different than all of the other ones that you have to do, the ones tomorrow and the ones that you've just done. I try to train myself that way, and I think it becomes very effective, especially when you're trying to relate to someone that you're interviewing or a group that you're interviewing. And so I've seen it happen. I've learned from others in the business. We know the terrific interviewers that are involved in the organization, or people that also have to be interviewed, or you're presenting play-by-play. For example, when I do play-by-play of an event, I'm thinking, all right, I will look even at the opponent. Let's say we're playing the Cleveland Browns in week 1. And I will study the Cleveland Browns from an intimate standpoint, as far as, or at least from a dig down deep, not only from a football standpoint to know what Kevin Stefanski's doing as a head coach, or Baker Mayfield, or what they've done in the draft or defensively, but also to look at each individual player. And is there a story from the Cleveland Browns that ties into the Chiefs kingdom? More often than not, there is. And so I try to highlight that because it becomes, again, an individual case. You don't just mail in a game. You try to find some way to make that game come alive for your audience. It's the same thing when you do an interview or you're being interviewed. We can get caught where we're just become rote. And I think the best ones that I've seen in the business are those that treat everyone as if it's the only one they'll ever do and the only one they've ever done.
Awesome. Well, I've been learning a lot, but I was wondering if you had one kind of summative piece of advice you would give to a recent college graduate looking to get into your sportscasting field.
Especially if they're in sports, Taylor, what I'm seeing in a deficiency is to understand the psychology of sport, understand the realm of which you and I have to work in. And it's why I was so beneficial going to a small school. I played everything. So I felt the work of early morning weight workouts or 2-a-days practices. I experienced that. Mm-hmm. It would be great for someone who's planning. I always try to get an encompassing education. That's why the business degree was valuable. Business, psychology, marketing, it's all good to have in a framework of doing your formal education. But your informal education is try to put yourself in a position where you're in the mind and heart of a competitor or a coach, because I think from a psychological standpoint, it helps. Mm-hmm. And I think too often we have to understand this. When we enter it as a profession, it is no longer our leisure. And up to that point, it has been our leisure. We got a fantasy football team. MLB fantasy team. How's my team doing? Oh, I won. I got the office pool. I won $100. That changes. That's over. And what I'm seeing is many times a difficulty in trying to make that transition of people who are involved in sports in the profession, of realizing it is no longer your leisure or fantasy, it's reality. And that is, to understand that concept, I think is almost the alpha point of getting started in this business.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Holthus, thank you so much for spending your time and talking to us today. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers did as well.
Well, it's great again to have this opportunity to speak to you, Taylor. And again, the organization, it wasn't always easy to be president. I remember and being on the board, but because there was at that time, it was a little bit of a crisis time, but I believe in the organization. It's very valuable. It's more valuable now, I think, than ever because of the things that I stated earlier in the interview, from accountability, understanding, communication, informal communication when you're not under deadline. That's so important. And sometimes we can get caught up in the award winners, and I think that's a huge part of it. But I think the organization also has to understand and knows this, but the members have to understand its value beyond just an awards weekend.
Mhm. That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the
Yeah.
time to speak to us today. And thank you so much to everybody who watched.
All right. Thank you.